I would like to make an announcement. Recently, I've made some Amrita pills. These were made back in 2014. I believe I've given you some of those in the past as well, and this time I am going to give you this as a gift. Another thing is that this is the Shakyamuni Buddha's statue that's been blessed by the Sangha, and these are all consecrated. I believe some of our fellow volunteer members had this as well. This is a very well-made statue. I personally really like this one. I think maybe in the future we'll make another small Shakyamuni Buddha's statue. These are all consecrated by the Sangha. And these Amrita pills are mainly for our Sangha over here. For those of you who had not participated in the to provide service to the Sangha, and not in this group of studying, then there's no way for us to provide this to you. The Khenpos and Khenmos can distribute these pills to you. In the past, I also made the announcement. I also addressed on the importance of the Amrita pills. Let it be when people are ill or when you really need the 3 jewels to give you blessings. This is quite a crucial method to use at that period of time. Some people advise me to ask those of you who receive these Amrita pills to make a promise and write down their commitments not to, for example, beg for alms with this. And then I said, no, you don't need to write down the write those down and then signing this by saying that, oh, the Amritas, you have to chant the mantras or you have to release so-and-so numbers of lives so that you can receive 1 Amrita pill. I could do so, but then I feel that if I were to ask you to accomplish certain things whenever I give you gifts, then you would feel a sense of burden, just as a poor person who borrowed a lot of money from the others and don't have the ability to pay back, and then you would feel quite burdensome in your mind. Therefore, I am not asking you to fulfill certain requirements. But of course, do not use this to beg for alms or make all kinds of propagandas for it. There's no need for that. Just as yesterday, I heard that people started to beg for alms to build my floors for my house, which is still standing there. Currently, we're investigating who spread that rumor. There are lots of people around the teachers nowadays. There are the kind of people who don't have any hidden agendas, rather they just work for the activity of the Guru. But there are the kind of people around the Gurus using the name of the Guru and using the blessed objects of the Guru, using all kinds of things done by the Guru to adorn themselves, to propagate themselves. There are people like that as well. And then there's another type of person who probably don't have any hidden agendas, probably just out of pure goodwill, but their actions are quite foolish, which then in turn turn made others not generating faith to themselves and to the guru. And there are people with great wisdom, and they have a pure intention. In such a way, there are the Tibetans, and then of course there are the Chinese as well. They know what to do, they know how to do those things, they know how to get along with the others, and they have lots of good wisdom that can be used in terms of the worldly sense or the dharmic sense. And they can bring about lots of benefits. And there's definitely the kind of people without wisdom and without good intention, which could bring forth lots of negative influence to the others. Also, there's another group of people who, out of insecurity and greed, they would hold on to the teacher or even control the teacher in such a way. The others, when they make such observation, they would feel that, oh, the poor teacher. So it's quite important for yourself to adjust your mind and your own aspiration, your own ways of action when you're serving a teacher, let it be Khenpos or Khenmos. Otherwise, it could be negative. It could bring negative influence to the activity of your teacher. This time, by giving you the blessed objects like such, like the Amrita pills and so on, I hope you cherish this opportunity and cherish the blessed objects and not use it for other means. In such a way, it could harm the other's faith. So we should be very aware of our action and the possible influence upon the others. Of course, you can always repent and make confession afterwards. I would just like to remind you that we need to be very aware and very mindful when we're serving the teacher or Sangha. For example, when I was serving Phuntsog Rinpoche, I constantly remind myself that because I am close to Phuntsog Rinpoche and serving him as an attendant, therefore I have to be more aware of my action and possible influence to the others. Otherwise, it could create negative results up on the others, or maybe a negative impression of Phuntsog Rinpoche. So I have to be very mindful. Because everyone, in fact, they have a very different mentality. Their mindsets are very different. So we have to be very careful with interpersonal relationships when it comes to dealing with the others. Each of the disciples are very different in terms of their capacity as well as their mindset. There are people, for example, take their gurus as their personal property, and then they would gather into small groups and try to take the guru as their property. In that way, I think it is indeed quite foolish. And there are people who constantly tell the others that, oh, my guru needs money, and they beg for alms on behalf of the guru's name. And they would say that my guru is very poor, he doesn't have money. In that way, I think the guru is indeed very poor in the sense that if you think your guru doesn't have money because he doesn't have any merit, if the guru has some merit, then he would definitely not be lacking of any money. Therefore, whenever you start to say that the guru doesn't have money and he's very poor, at that moment you perceive the guru as the mundane being out of the mundane being. Maybe you're doing it out of a good heart, but I think as a true spiritual guide, as a true spiritual teacher, they're not lack of any wealth, any of the worldly wealth, because as someone who has renounced the worldly concerns, then he doesn't need money. As long as there's food and clothing to wear, then everything else is just an extra. So if there is some extra money, they can use it to engage in charitable activities. Otherwise, they just engage in spiritual practice and teachings. Nowadays, it is no longer an era to beg for alms in a large scale. Otherwise, it is very likely that you will be reported and your activity will be defined as fraud, online fraud. Even just a few thousands of dollars could lock you up in the retreat house. So I really hope that you need to learn to protect yourself, refrain yourselves from inappropriate activities. It is quite crucial because nowadays the internet is so much advanced, and whatever you do is without any privacy. Whatever you say, whatever you do, they're completely transparent. So whatever you do, it would be the best if you do them properly. For example, people who used to be who used to serve the Sangha, and then if you were to use the resources, and then later with those resources you get greedy, and then some activities related to that greediness could lead to regretful actions both to yourself and to the others. If you're staying in Laronggar, there are sufficient food and clothing. If you really don't have any, then participate in chanting the mantras and practice with the Sangha. At least you will get some of the donations for the chanting mantras. So at least before we have the pandemic over here or the war over here, in this Laronggar, in this valley, you will not starve to death. As long as you don't starve to death, what else could a practitioner ask for? Other than that, we just need to practice all kinds of virtuous things at our capacity. I myself have already stopped all of my extra charitable activities. In the future, I am just going to step back and start to practice on my own. And in the future, I hope you can do that as well. I've probably spoke for too long.
Tujo gombo shano nyala ju tuyo chigdon jibru shinji lo terter jari jankam nawali kebramam jin jiktin tamba na chagnen jikton karwa namba rnamje le tambo yamchid rnamyi meye chagjan namka laften nutyang tevjin no sarj laften nurnam me chagde datram durdi rimbro yewa na tenjir tendang tembak samtag le Tambom jong ramtsag ramjin tsir tombo karwan zugbu jini de yinkar namtag namka karsar gye karsar gya tonsam tamnyam standar longchag de chibshi de kun kebr tsibngir dibshi tang shmshidem jibshi de namchig rimba jin chib dar tur tang dchig susurum jed mdogor jan gyachim yibnja mankedibji Ringamsa Hotsada Sayam Bum, Jingbum La, Jarna Jamid, Jamchak Durji, and Ja, Sirgi Nyambo. Sirgi Nyambo, Sirgi Nyambo, Sirgi Nyambo, Janchin Diba Le, Dirtan Charbab Chi, Kirnkurno. Jivak sartag jivsha kunner dam ringamsa khogtsudam bamchig chigchig na nyech stenshidar lungum tavni kur chivshidar lunga cheter namchip be dirtang sayi kirnkur chivje chig ringamsa khogtsud simbam nyech la gyachun bamchig chigni stomchig sim gyapchig shetan ringadam jeba go 第三天呢，人生讲到这了。好，今天我们为度化一切众生。
To liberate all sentient beings, let us generate the supreme bodhicitta.
那我们现在呢开始。
Now let us begin our class.
讲什么？就讲这个
on the wish-fulfilling treasury that's composed by omniscient Longchenpa. This is one of his 7 treasuries. This wish-fulfilling treasury mainly talks about 2 aspects. One is the samsara that should be rejected, and the other one is the nirvana that should be accepted. Previously, we've already talked about the animate and inanimate world within samsara. We talked about the base and the manifested world. Within the manifested world, we've already covered the brief explanation of the saha world. And today we will begin the extensive explanation on the saha world in its branches. From our last class, we've already learned that Vajrayana Buddha manifested the whole flower essence world. This flower essence world is beyond our imagination, beyond our conception. It is completely unfathomable for our dualistic mind. For such a vast and inconceivable world, we've already talked about how within the fragrant watered ocean, on top of the flowers, on top of the lotus flowers, there are the layered 25 worlds, and the 13th world is our Saha world. Of course, around the Saha worlds, there are many different worlds around the south and north and east and all the directions. This kind of cosmos, this kind of worldview and cosmology can be only accepted through faith, and because it's completely beyond our dualistic conception. But that's fine if we can just understand it and take it with our faith. According to the Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that if one were to develop faith in this without slandering, with practice, one would definitely attain the supreme enlightenment. So the Mahayana teachings should be taken with faith. For people with sharp capacity and with faith, they will be able to receive these teachings. For people without wisdom and without faith, then these kinds of ideas are completely out of their mind and they cannot understand it. And for those of you who had never studied teachings like such, some of the teachings, I think it would be easy for you to understand, and some of you probably is difficult for you, for your mindset right now, but that's okay. If you really couldn't accept this particular teaching, don't worry about it, but don't give up either. You can see it as some kind of a new theory, a new hypothesis, because even our now science and philosophical schools and all kinds of religion, all kinds of cultures, that they can only provide a hypothesis. When it comes to our world, it is complex. Everyone has different understanding, even including religion. Even inside different religions and different schools, they have different understanding and explanation of the cosmos, of the formation of cosmos. So if you really cannot take this particular teaching or accept it, then at least do not give up, do not generate a wrong view. Because the cosmology that's presented over here, the view of cosmos, even including the scientific explanation of cosmos, they are still at the stage of hypothesis. There is no certainty by saying that it is so. The so-called Big Bang theory, there's still a theory regarding the origin of the cosmos. There is no definitive answer to it. especially when it comes to, for example, even talking about the origin or beginning of the Milky Way galaxy, it is said that it happened around 13.6 billion years ago. But can you come up with certain evidence of it? Could you be certain of that? No, because there's simply the logical analysis based on the conception of the scientists, or there are the other data that's available to the archaeologists. So those are simply the analysis based on our logic. And they are not that reliable. Therefore, when it comes to the inconceivable aspects, I think the Buddhism teachings are more clear. When we're getting into the wish-fulfilling treasury, the teachings given by Longchenpa, some of it could be a little different than that of the Sutrayana teachings. This unique explanation given by Longchenpa, not sure where it comes from, not sure where the source is, maybe because of maybe it is based on his vast and inconceivable wisdom. So we will continue to discuss about it in the next few classes. Today we will begin on the extensive explanation on the Saha world, and mainly about the four kalpas, that is the formation, duration, degradation, and the empty kalpa. Previously we've already talked about the Vajrayana Buddha manifested this world. He manifested this world out of space. Within this manifestation, the Saha world is part of that manifestation. In fact, there are numerous manifestations that's in the Pure Land that's manifested by Vajrayana, including this 25-layered world on top of the stamen of the lotus. In fact, on the different directions and on the different flower petals and different leaves of the lotus flower, there are still numerous lands that's manifested by the Vajrayana Buddha. Yesterday we talked about the mind of mind, a pure land that's manifested by Vajrayana, which is the Saha world. This is at the center of the wisdom mind of Vajrayana. This is the Saha world. So we've already covered on how the Saha world, or where it is located. But this Saha world also goes through the four stages, which is the formation, duration, degradation, and then into the empty kalpa. Each of the four periods will take 20 medium kalpas. So 4 times 20 medium kalpa. Therefore, that would count as one large kalpa. This particular teaching is similar to the Abhidharma and the Mahavibhasha Shastra. The so-called big kalpa include 80 medium kalpas. In each of the medium kalpas, there are 20 small kalpas. Now let's talk about the 4 periods or 4 stages of the Saha world, the formation, duration, degradation, and emptiness. So there are the now following is the explicit explanation, which has 3 aspects. The first one is the explanation on the formation. That's the content of the 3rd and 4th chapter. And then the duration, kalpa, which is the 5th chapter. 然后对，就是这个注解的话呢，应该是第5品是吧？然后可能空解的话呢，就是空界和还有那个对，就是坏界和空界。I believe the empty kalpa and the kalpa of degradation are included in one chapter. but we'll look at it later. First of all, we're going to look at the formation kalpa, which is divided into three parts: the brief explanation, extensive explanation, and the summary. Let's look at this world, the Saha world. How did it form? That's something that we really want to know. In the verse, it says that in this way it appears in the world of the Buddha, especially expounding on the Saha world domain, the four kalpas of formation, formation, duration, degradation, and amti-kalpa. The world we have contains two parts, the animate and the inanimate. How did both of them form? When we talk about kalpa, when we talk about the four kalpas, the formation, duration, degradation, and the amti-kalpa, after a kalpa reaches to the empty kalpa, for 20 kalpas, it is in vacuity. It is without anything. It is complete voidness. In such a state, after 20 kalpas, slowly the sentient beings descend from above, because the very subtle consciousness, usually the consciousness from the formless realm, descend to form realm and then descend to the desire realm. Even till today, we still have those stories, folklores, and various kinds of sayings that human beings descend from above, such as the heaven realm or the celestial realm, or the Abhasvara heaven according to Buddhism. There are various kinds of sayings very similar to it, that the sentient beings descend from above. So first of all, the sentient beings descend from the formless realm in terms of their consciousness, and then their consciousness get more and more coarse. The consciousness then become the form realm beings, and then the desire realm beings. Those of you who studied the Abhidharma teachings, you're probably quite clear of it. How did the inanimate world form then? It relies on two bases. One is the space and also descend from above. The other one is based on ground, starting to build from the ground. Later we will get more in detail about it, how the 5 wheels slowly builds up the inanimate world from below. How the 5 wheels slowly built or became the ground and then further builds up. So the animate world then descend from above, and the inanimate world has two conditions or two bases. One is that it's formed from space and also descending from above. The other one is building from the 5 wheels and becomes the ground and then slowly to build upwards. So these are the two causes and conditions, and that's how the inanimate world forms. And both of them are the blessings of the wisdom of the Vairochana Buddha. So in front of sentient beings, we can call it that these are the manifestation of the Vairochana's wisdom. This is the manifestation out of Vairochana Buddha. Or according to some of the other religious schools, they would talk about a creator who created this world. There are some similarities when we talk about creating, but in Buddhism we would discuss much more in detail about how it formed. Now let's look at the extensive explanation on the inanimate world's formation. later we will look at how the sentient world or the animate world formed. In these two chapters, firstly, we're going to look at the inanimate. In terms of the inanimate world's formation, it has two aspects. The first one is the general explanation on the inanimate world's formation, and the second one is on the explanation of the 1,000-fold worlds. Let's look at the verses. Over here it says that these are briefly explained in the three aspects. By stages, they are the base, the object, and the subject. These three are the general summary of the later content, which briefly talks about how the phenomenal world formed. Firstly, there's the base, and then subsequently there's the object and the subject. It is briefly expounded over here in this short verse. And then by steps, later we're going to learn about the base, and then the object, and then the subject. We will study it more explicitly in the later part. Venerable Longchenpa, in fact, quoted and used a sutra in the Mahayana tradition as the basis for his explanation over here. There is a sutra called Agana Sutra. I believe it was translated into the Chinese language back in Sui Dynasty, circa 600 CE. It has a few different names. What it means is that the sutra of the creation of the world, or the formation of the world, it is in the Agama Sutra between the 18th chapter to the 22nd chapter. Some said that this particular sutra is composed by 500 arhats. Some of the arhats' teachings can also be called suttas. According to Sabhativada school, they said that this is composed by 500 arhats. But some said that this teaching was expounded by the Buddha himself. This is considered as one of the most ancient and important teachings on cosmology in Buddhism. Now, according to the Mahayana teachings, according to Avatamsaka Sutra and Tantrayana, how is this inanimate world explained? It is explained in such ways. Firstly, it talks about the base, and then later we'll cover the 5 wheels. The 5 element wheels. First is the space wheel, and then the wind element wheel, and then the water element wheel, and then the and then the ground. Upon the ground, there are the 2 element wheels. One is the element wheel of metal, and the other one on top of it is the element wheel of earth. The teachings over here is not too specific about the later 2 wheels, but I think it would be easier to understand if we were to split them into 2. Now, the whole world is based on, the whole phenomenal world is based on these 5 wheels. The 9 types of mountains, the 8 great oceans, the 12 continents, the 4 big and 8 small, all use it as its base. The 3 realms, the beings of the 3 realms, all need to rely on it. Later we will talk in detail. These 3 are really important: the base, object, and subject. These are the main content that we will cover in the phenomenal world. Previously, we've already talked about the 5 elemental wheels as the base, and then later we will look at the mountains and continent and ocean, and then we will talk about the subjects. Let's first look at the 5 elemental wheels as base. In the verse it says, at first the element layers, the principle of nature. When intermediate empty kalpa had completed, pure consciousness space is wide, bright, and vast. Then 3,000 wind wheels form from above. The worldview, according to Venerable Longchenpa, is a bit different, rather quite different than our worldview. How do the Mahayana Buddhists expound about the formation of the world? In fact, firstly, there's the empty kalpa. After the 20 empty kalpa completed, then there is the space called the pure mind or pure consciousness space. The color of it is white, or some kind of a grayish color. However, at the same time, it is very bright. It is really vast. It is as vast as the 3,000-fold world. This is that kind of space. This is the space where the wind elemental wheel would rely on. According to other sutras, such as Avatamsaka Sutra or in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, they all talked about how all the other elements rely on space. According to wish-fulfilling Treasury, I think, according to Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that the karmic creation of the sentient beings is inconceivable. Because of the karmic force of the sentient beings, the karma of wind started to stir. Because of the great wind elemental wheel, there arise the whole world, the great oceans, mountains, and the celestial palaces, as well as the great treasure, the brightness, as well as all kinds of phenomenal world. These are according to the description in Avatamsaka Sutra, as it is stated that by the karma of the sentient beings and then by the power of the wheel of the wind element. On top of the wind element, there is the water element. The same teaching is also recorded in the Agana Sutra. It says that the ground rests on top of water and water on wind, wind on space. This is taught in the Uttara Tantra Shastra as well. So our ground rests on top of water, the water wheel, and water rests on wind and wind on space. In the Sutras and Shastras, specifically, it didn't really talk about the space. In fact, this space is illuminated with a white hue. Therefore, on top of that, the name of this particular space is called clear and pure consciousness space. It is very pure. It is white and it pervades the great 3,000-fold world. This space is not the same as the space that we refer to usually. We should know that this so-called space that we're referring here is the base for all the 5 elemental wheels to rely on. Therefore, it's different than the space that we usually refer to. So on top of this space, there then arise the wheel of wind. And because of the sentient beings' collective karma, This is according to Avatamsaka Sutra, where it says that because of the collective karma of the sentient beings in Saha world, there then arise the wind, just as how there's a seed to all the crops that we have. The seed of wind is the karma of the sentient beings. Because of the collective karma of the sentient beings, the world then begins. So, the very beginning cause of the world's formation is the karma of sentient beings, which then rely upon space. The pure consciousness space that we discussed earlier can be also the karma of sentient beings, though it is not explained explicitly in the Sutras and Shastra, but that is the subtle formation of the beginning of the world. There are all kinds of theories and stories about the creation, about the beginning of humanity, of sentient beings, and the beginning of the world. For example, in Vedic tradition, in the Chinese tradition, and the Egyptian tradition, they all discuss that there used to be space at first, in the primordial formless space, and then there's the ocean, and then upon ocean slowly forms mountains, and upon a mountain there lived a god or a creator. And slowly, this creator created everything. For example, in the Chinese tradition, it says that there was a person whose name is Pangu. He slept in this coalescent cosmic egg for 18,000 years. All of a sudden, for some reason, he woke up. Not knowing where he was, he split open this world with an axe. Because he split open this cosmic egg, then there's light. At that time, he was really afraid that the sky and the earth will start to coalesce and mix and become chaotic again. Therefore, he stepped hard on top of the ground and pushed the sky towards the top, while growing taller every day within that distance. The sky does not fall anymore, and the ground doesn't go up anymore. After a long period of time, after the sky and the ground is set, he fell down and transformed into things of this world. For example, his breath turned into air, clouds, and sound, and his voice turned into the sound of thunder. His eyes turned into moon and the sun. His skin turned into the ground, and the river is transformed from his blood, and the hair transformed into the grass, and so on and so forth. In the Indian Vedic tradition, they also talk about there's a primordial ocean at the beginning, and then there's an egg in between, a cosmic egg in that ocean. Inside that egg, there's the Brahma that's within. And then he broke open the egg and created the world out of chaos. There are lots of creation stories. Some of the stories that we still listen to in this world, they're no other than folklores. But some of them, they carry some kind of truth of the history of human formation and human world. But maybe because of the time being too long, and nowadays people just look at those creation stories as mythology, as stories. How this world was created, some of the people would say that, oh, it's because someone created it. Some said that it is slowly transformed into this world. So right now it's very difficult to come to a definitive conclusion. But according to wish-fulfilling Treasury, it talks about how the world formed into this shape was because of this space, this wheel of space, and then later placed it with this name. On top of this space, then it forms the wheel of the wind element. In this verse, it talks about what this wind wheel looks like. It says that it can turn and spread. It is coarse and it gathers. It can mature and it separates in 6 stages, respectively. Previously, we've already talked about the wheel of space, the wheel of space that's named of pure consciousness. On top of it, there's the wheel of wind element. Other than the kind of dark tornadoes and hurricane, in fact, we don't really see those wheels. We don't really see the wind because it is air. It is rather a force that's pushing the air. If it is not that the wind could carry some dust, then we can hardly find it, we can hardly see it. Over here it says that there are 6 types of wind in the wheel of wind element. The first one is the churning wind. It can turn, it can start the wind that turns, that spins. So this is the first one, the churning wind. After the churning wind pacifies, or sometimes it is at the same time, the second type of wind started to arise. It's called spreading wind. This wind would spread to everywhere. Just as how there are days where we see the dark clouds would spread all over the space. Similar to that, the all-spreading wind would spread everywhere. The third wind is called the coarse wind. It's the wind that comes with certain sounds or makes certain sounds, just as the wind that we have over here sometimes, making various. We have lots of wind over here. We have lots of windy weathers. And do you remember those sounds? Sometimes we hear the roof, and sometimes the roof will get blown away. And that type of wind is probably called the coarse wind, maybe in that category. On top of that, there's the gathering wind. Probably gathers all the wind that was spreading everywhere. This gathering wind would gather all of those winds together. The fifth one is maturing wind. The maturing wind is the fire wind. It is red and is bright because it could spread all the burning, all the fire. In different fire, there are the seeds of different elements too, the 4 elements, that is earth, water, fire, and wind. Because the seed of fire has the power of maturation. Whenever the world matures, then there is the element of fire that is needed. So maybe this one, the wheel of this maturation wind, could also be part of the fire wheel, but it doesn't really specify over here. Now the last wind is called the wind that separates. And because of all the 6 winds formed, therefore the world started to appear in different variations, started to have different colors and different variations. And because of that cause and condition, again, it contributes to the causes to start the stirring wind or the churning wind. After 6 times being a cycle, then the true fire wheel forms. Usually, you don't hear these kinds of description in other sutras and shastras. Now, how about the colors of this wind? And over here, it talks about the color is green and it has the shape of a cross. It is 6,000 billion yojanas in thickness, vast without boundaries, indestructible as a vajra. These are the characteristics of the wind wheel. Over here it says that the color is green, but in the commentary it says that it is as green as sapphire. I'm not sure if there are green sapphires. But usually we don't really talk about a wind that has color other than the practice of prana. Green wind. Is sapphire green? Are there green sapphires?
好，知道了。没有听到什么，开玩笑。这样的这个颜色是这样的，这个蓝绿色
The color
像
is
宝石一样的，就是这个缝是这样的。
blue greenish
然后它的
color,
形
just
状呢，
like
就是它是
the
这个圆弧环
hue
绕
or the sheen
然后这个
in
十字金
the
刚啊，就是
sapphire
十字金刚处
in
一
the
样
jewel.
就是那个乾心
And
标
in
往
terms of the
里面
shape,
这个
it
缝
is
的话呢，
as
就
the
是从东
double
方往西走，西
vajra
方往东
that
走，
is
南方
in the
往
shape of
北
the
方去，
cross.
北方的这个缝呢，
In
就是
the
往这个南方
memorandum
吹，
of
最后的
the
是就是形
preliminary
成了一个
practices
十字
where
架
it
一
says
样
that
的，
the
就是这么一个缝
east
缝
wind
隙的，
blows
所以
to
说
the
它
west
周
and
围
the
是
west
也是
wind
环
blows
绕
to
的，
the
就是
east
但
and
实
the
际上呢，就是
southern
它都
wind
是以
blows
这个
to
十字
the
架一样
north
啊，就是
and northern
可能
wind
是现在
blows
的
to
这
the
种
south,
很
and
多这个十字
that
架的话呢，
forms
就是跟
into
这
the
个自
shape
然
of
之
a
力
cross.
这种界啊，就是也许可能是有关系的，就是所以
Maybe
这个
that's why
就是这
there
样
are
的，就是
lots
十
of
字柱，
symbols
这是
of
它的这个
cross
形
around
状
the
讲的。
world,
然后它的这个缝
because
的
it is
厚度
very
的
much
话呢，就是
correlated
6000
to
亿
the natural
有
world.
性了，就是6000亿
In
亿有
terms of
性。
the thickness, it is as thick as 6,000 billion yojanas in thickness. It
然后它的
is
方圆呢，就是是无边无际
without
的。
the
还有它
boundary.
的作用是什么样呢？作用的话呢，就是非常这个
In
坚
terms
实
of
的
its
啊，就
function,
是它依靠这
it
个
is
风轮的话呢，就是可以
indestructible.
存
It is
在
very
这个
solid.
存住这个水轮啊，
Based
就是还有
on
地轮，
this
就是就全部都要依靠
wheel
它。
of
所以这个
wind,
风呢，不像我们一般的这个风，一
then
般的
there's
风
the
的话呢，它没有
water
这个
wheel that
动
could
力，就是没有
could be
那种这
supported
个
by the
怎么说啊，
wheel
就是
of wind.
压力，
Unlike
无力的那种
nowadays,
重压力，怎么学的？就是
when we
说
talk
压
about the
力
wind,
那就
because this
是
is not the
学你们就是这么有
mundane wind that we're talking about.
重力呀，怎么
There are
讲？
a few different forces. Do you remember? That's talked about in physics.
啊？什么？万有引力，
Gravity?
万有引力这个不是这个，
No, it's not gravity. That's not the force I'm talking about.
重力压力什么？重力
Pressure.
还是有一个。我的笔记
There's
上
an
应该
there's
有，我再
another
看一下以前
particular
读中
force,
上面有
but I'll look into it. I'm sure it's in my journal, in my notes
跟你也
when
没啥
I
关系吧
studied physics in middle school.
它是这样的那
But
个。
oh well, it's fine. We don't really
不
need
过
it.
刚才我们这里说是它的厚度啊，就是厚度的话
When we
呢
talked about the
6000 亿
thickness
有
of
性
this wind
然后
wheel,
大毗婆沙
it
论里
says
面呢
that
就是
it
16
is
亿有性
6,000 billion yojanas in thickness, but according to the
然后它的这个光度的话呢
Mahavibhasha
也是一样的，这个
Shastra,
无数的，就是
it
还有
says
它
that
的
it
体
is
性呢就是
of
坚固的。
1.6
这个
billion
方面呢，就
yojanas.
是没有什么说的，就是
The
所以我们这边如果有的话
vastness
呢，就是一个是
is
像
also
这个
immeasurable.
就是这个宇宙观的时候呢，就是如果有
form of it is
大
solid.
毗婆沙论，就是网上也应该有，就是这个是很重要的。
If you would like
这个
to make
举世论的
reference
这个主要
to
依据是
the
毗婆沙论
various
毗婆沙论
commentaries
是
on
500
Abhidharma, you
这个
should
阿罗
read
汉
into
道
the Mahavibhasha
然后
Shastra,
后来呢，就是汉文
which
当
was
中是
composed
有
by
玄奘
500
当时翻
arhats.
译的
Later,
我们藏文当中
Master
是有这个毗婆沙
Xuanzang
论
back in Tang Dynasty translated this into Chinese language. But in Tibetan language, we don't have the Mahavibhasha Shastra. It is said that Vairochana specifically placed the Mahavibhasha Shastra in the book Treasury of the Sanskrit literature. And he said that in order for the sentient beings to remember the kindness of the great masters, this text should be kept without being translated. It was only later Master Fazun started to translate it into the Chinese language, and he completed the translation. And then back in 50s and the 60s, the translation were mailed to certain great masters abroad, but there were a few chapters that's missing. And then Tulku Tutanima Rinpoche translated this and then later got published into Tibetan language, that is. This is a text that's very much treasured in the history of Tibet. Many people wanted to receive this teaching. In Abhidharma, there are lots of the quotations from the Mahavibhasha Shastra. Nowadays, we have Abhidharma classes, especially the Lama's Abhidharma classes. I heard that the Jomos, the female monastics classes, also are going very well. When Pontsukul Rinpoche was still alive, the Abhidharma classes delved deeply into the research of the Abhidharma teaching. Anyhow, in the Chinese language, Master Xuanzang translated the text into the Chinese language, and then later, Master Fazun also quite respectful because he translated the Mahavibhasha Shastra from Chinese language into Tibetan language, being a Chinese. He translated the whole text, and the language was very well used, very easy to understand as well. So you see, Vairochana weren't willing to translate the text, but Master Fazun translated it for us. The Mahavibhasha, as I stated before, some of the numbers are not very much the same with the numbers that's stated over here in terms of the thickness, the vastness. But maybe because the units are different from various parts of India back then. For example, before the unification of units in mainland China back in the time of Qing Dynasty, there are lots of different units in various countries. For the same reason, in India, there are lots of different names for different units. The numbers are different according to Abhidharma and Avatamsaka Sutra and this text as well, but I'm not quite sure why. Sometimes you can cross-reference with the others as well. Anyhow, it says that the water wheel sets on top of the wind wheel, and the wind wheel is as indestructible as the Vajra. It has to be indestructible, otherwise how could it support the other wheels? Let's look at now the formation of the water wheel. And it says that gold essence clouds gather, from which it rains down water like wheels. And the name of this wheel is called Peaceful Clarity. The shape is round. Now, the clouds started to gather after the wind wheel is formed. The clouds that gathers over here, this particular type of clouds is called gold essence clouds. And from this gold essence clouds, it pours down rain as vast as wheels. It is fortunate that the sentient beings were not formed yet. Otherwise, in such kind of flooding rain that pours from the space, it must be quite terrifying. This particular water wheel is named Peaceful Clarity Water Wheel. It is in the shape of a circle. It is also stated in the Avatamsaka Sutra. It says that at the time of the formation of the 3,000-fold world, there is the great cloud that pours down rain, which is called the flood rain. Though that the name is different, not sure if it's the same water wheel. But the description is the same. So what's the dimension of this water wheel? It is as thick as 1.12 million yojanas in thickness. By relying on the wind wheel, then the water doesn't fall out of that circle shape. It is just like how Earth has gravity. It has some kind of magnetizing force to magnetize this water wheel on top of the wind wheel so that the water will not flow out. Now, this is the third wheel. And then in the verses it says that a wind-based encircling to churning wind churns all water. Up on it, the earth wheel forms. So this is the formation of the earth wheel. After we talked about the wind wheel, then it forms the water wheel, and the water wheel slowly turns just like the tsunami that we have nowadays, or we see nowadays. And then the water makes sound and it turns just like so the water kept on churning just like how at the time turning milk into butter. If you keep churning again and again slowly, it will become butter. The water that we see nowadays, though that there is no churning in the winter, but it also could form into a solid ice in that format. So water, by the collective karma of the sentient beings, can also form ground in such a way. It is not out of other reasons, rather it is the collective karma of sentient beings. According to Mahavibhasha Shastra, it says that after the water wheel, the wind started to churn it, and then on top of water it gathers gold or gathers metal. So by this kind of form, then the ground started to form. It is in the shape of a rectangle, and the color is gold. So this is the base that the Saha world rests on. This is the ground that we have. Therefore, I think first is the space wheel, and then wind wheel, and then water wheel, and then the gold wheel, and then the earth wheel. But in the outline, it didn't specifically, in the verses, it didn't specifically talk about the gold wheel, but in the outline, it does talk about the gold wheel. So you should probably look into it. Now we've already covered the base. We'll stop here today.